How's it going, folks? Let's make some noise!
We want to welcome everybody here to Rights Generation, Aung San Suu Kyi Inspires the Next. My name is Kashima Davidson. I'm a youth activist here in the DC area. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you have a cell phone, we want you to please turn it on silent or turn it off. If you can do that right now, that would be great.
My name is Akib Yakub. I'm a student activist coordinator up in the great state of Maine. There we go. I'm a student activist coordinator up in the state of Maine, and I'm a student at Colby College in Waterville, Maine.
So, one of the things we love to do here at Amnesty International is that we love to chant. We love to rally in front of embassies. We love to get loud and rambunctious to let them know that we're here. We're not going to go away until you respect human rights. So, we're going to do a little chanting right now.
I think you all know what's coming next. I think we all know how to do it very well. Right? I'm going to hell with this. Yes, I'll put this one down. I'm going to say, what do you want? Human rights. When do you want it? Now. Okay. Let's make some noise. Amnesty. What do we want? Human rights. When do we want them? Now. I don't know, Kashima. Are you feeling that?
Can we get a little louder?
We're at Rights Generation. Aung San Suu Kyi Inspires the Next. Amnesty International. What do we want? Human rights. When do we want them? Now. What do we want? Human rights. When do we want them? Now. Yeah, this is an... Yeah. Clap it up. This is an incredible group, incredible energy, and we have an incredible program for you today. But before we start, we're going to do some roll call. I know this morning, I'm from the Northeast, right? I know this morning, tons of Northeast activists hopped in buses and headed down to DC, right? Yeah? So Northeast, let's make some noise! Yeah!
Okay, so I'm from the Mid-Atlantic region.
Oh, sorry.
So I know for a fact that us folks here in the Mid-Atlantic region can get a little louder than the folks in the Northeast. So how about the folks in the Mid-Atlantic region? Let me hear you shout.
This is an incredible crowd, but we're not the only ones here today.
Right now, we're going to cue a video. Sorry, let me just put this down. Right now, we're going to cue a video from some activists, youth activists all across the country who weren't able to join us here in person, but wanted to share in the experience as well.
Two, three. With love from your Seattle fantasy. Aung San Suu Kyi, Texas stands with you. Burma stands with Aung San Suu Kyi.
Give them all a round of applause.
Yep. Now, with great honor, I introduce Joanne Libby Hawk, a member of Amnesty International's board. Joanne?
Well, hi everyone. I'm, as you know, I'm actually Joan Libby Hawk, but that's all right. And I'm a proud member of AIUSA, and I'm also privileged to serve on the board of directors. And I want to welcome you all and thank you for coming. This is truly an occasion which I know we will always remember. It's just one of those remarkable happenings in our lifetimes that we get to be in the same room with this remarkable woman. I also want to take a minute just to thank the sponsors of this event who make it possible for us to come together. Kathy and Scott McCullough, Yono Lennon, the law firms of Adams Hussey, and Fred and Flora Haslavi. And now I'm delighted to introduce to you Frank Januzzi, who's the director of AIUSA's Washington office, and I can't wait to hear the rest of this program. Thank you.
Good morning. How did we get here? I already know some of you were on a bus at 5 o'clock in the morning. Some of you were on trains at 4 o'clock in the morning. But why are we here? Why are we here in this shrine to the rights that Amnesty International represents, this steel and glass monument to the First Amendment, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of religion? We're here to honor Daw Aung San Suu Kyi. She has been an inspiration to me and to many of us in this room. But if it were only her inspiration, I think we might not be here, because this audience has been inspired by others in their lives. A family member, a friend, maybe a special teacher. Someone who taught us to care about justice and human rights. And I want to tell you about the person who inspired me. It was my grandfather, Buell Gordon Gallagher. He lit the flame of justice inside of me. He taught me as a young boy that in a world where one is enslaved, none are truly free. He taught me that in a country where equal rights are the law, we have to fight for those rights every single day to make it a reality. And he taught me by his example to have courage. When he was in Alabama and the Ku Klux Klan came after him and his wife and his 2 young daughters, he did not back down, he did not run away. He and the civil rights movement of which he was a part persevered, and they overcame. This is the story of inspiration for me. It is the story of Aung San Suu Kyi's life. So why are we here? We are here because change is coming in Myanmar. We can see clearly now that there is a brighter future for Myanmar that is within reach. As a result of that change, the U.S. government has begun to lift sanctions. Burma is now officially open for business. But there's a caution there. When I went off to college at age 17, I was predisposed to get involved in causes. And the cause of my generation was ending the injustice of apartheid in South Africa. The students of Yale University were a long way from Johannesburg, South Africa. But they marched and they sang and they occupied Beinecke Plaza opposite the president's house. And they refused to leave until Yale would agree to divest itself of the corporate stock in the companies that were complicit in the injustice of apartheid. The world won that battle. There are enormous battles left to fight. Which brings me back to Burma. Now, in Burma today, the winds of change can be felt. The change is real, but oh, so fragile. And so as Burma opens for business, Amnesty International today is issuing a challenge. We have a challenge to anyone who would do business in Burma. We say to you, you must be an example. You must abide by the highest standards of international human rights. You must put people before profits and rights before rent. This is your solemn obligation. And guess what? Amnesty International has some advice to help you along the way. So today on our website, you can find good advice for businesses that want to invest responsibly in Burma. And we hope that all of you will do me a favor, because the fact is that inspiration, like the inspiration that Daw Suu provided to me when I met her for the first time 17 years ago, compassion that we have for people far from our shores who need our help, and the courage, none of those things are enough. Amnesty is about action, mated to that compassion. So I need you to do something. I know you've been told already to turn off your cell phones. I want you to get into your pockets and pull them out again. Keep them on mute. That's okay. But you are the multitasking rights generation. This is a tool for human rights. Hashtag rights generation. Tweet what you're about to witness here today. Go to amnestyusa.org. Join the more than 20,000 people who just in the last 12 hours have signed our petition to U.S. businesses to tell them to abide by the highest standards of human rights when they go into Burma. Use this tool. Use your voice. Use your idealism, the inspiration you carry within your souls, your compassion, your courage, and your action. That's what the world needs. It's what Amnesty International needs of you. And if you had any doubt about what those four qualities of inspiration, compassion, courage, and action can do together, then I would invite you to watch with me a short video that should erase any doubts in your minds. Thank you for being here.
She's been under house arrest in her native Burma for the best part of 20 years. Her crime is that if she was free to participate in elections, she would win.
You can't allow any government to go on doing what they want to do. There has to come a time when you say, that's enough.
It's been a long, long, lonely winter. Little darling, it seems like years since it's been here. Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun. It's all right.
I think one day I would like to be able to sit down to write to political prisoners in other parts of the world, to encourage them, to tell them we have achieved basic human rights in Burma through the help of Amnesty International.
Little darling, it seems like years since it's been clear. Ooh, there goes the sun. Here comes the sun, and I say,
as you know, in Burma, people cannot access information freely. It's they live under fear. So this kind of radio projects can help people to get information, especially to understand their rights and to do something for change.
Little darling, the smiles are returning to the faces. Little darling, it seems like years since they've been there.
We need to go out there and stand up for the people who can't, who they need a voice too.
I just hope for one day, hopefully in my lifetime, I'll see Aung San Suu Kyi be released.
Myanmar's pro-democracy leader has been released from house arrest.
She has been under detention, house arrest, for the past 15 of the past 21 years.
In a landmark vote, Burma's pro-democracy leader, Aung San Suu Kyi, has reportedly won her first bid for a seat in parliament, sparking scenes of jubilation among supporters. Official results are expected later this week. If confirmed, the vote could herald a new era for the country after decades of oppressive military rule.
Here goes the sun. Here comes the sun. And I say, it's all right. Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun.
Hello, Amnesty International. Good afternoon. My name is Alex Wagner. I host a show called Now with Alex Wagner. This is the most high-profile game of hooky I have ever played. But more importantly, and more to the point, I am also half Burmese. My mother, Tin Sui Thant, was born in Rangoon at the end of World War II. My grandmother, Mya Mya Ji, was born in Pakoku in 1917. After the government fell in 1962, my grandmother, my grandfather, my mother, and my uncle fled Burma to come to the U.S., where they would eventually become American citizens. As any first-generation American can tell you, the dream of the United States is a powerful one. We often grow numb to the pull of freedom when we live with it, and we discount the foundational importance of equality when it's the basis for our laws and for our lives. But to have come from a place like Burma, where such things could not have been taken for granted, is to be reminded constantly of the blessings of America and the sacrifices made to secure them. As such, I came to know Daw Aung San Suu Kyi, as many of us did, first as a metaphor, an icon for sacrifice and for struggle. As a child, I remember August 8th, 1988, relaying the information from my grandmother on one end of the phone to my mother standing with me in the kitchen about the pro-democracy uprising. "There's been a coup," my grandmother said. "There's been a coup," I said to my mom. "What's a coup?" I remember when Daw Suu Kyi won the Nobel Peace Prize, and even then, still in elementary school, feeling a sense of indignation that she couldn't leave the country to accept it. But surely we all thought, especially in those early days, it could not last. The immorality of what was happening in Burma was so crystal clear that one day the universe would course correct. And yet, for quite a long time, it did not. Nearly 20 years later, watching the government turn against thousands of Buddhist monks in 2007, my mother decided it was finally time to go home. So on New Year's Day of 2008, we landed in Rangoon. And among the first things we did was ask our taxi to take us to University Avenue. No address, of course, was needed. The driver just nodded and made sure that we knew we couldn't stop and we couldn't get out of the car. As the thousands and thousands of Burmese who've gathered in front of Aung San Suu Kyi's house well know, you cannot see it from the street. But I remember looking at my mother at the precise moment that we passed by the barbed wire fence, the thing separating her from us, and pumping our fists in solidarity, just low enough that no one would see us. I remember that moment on days like today, because even after all of those years, after leaving everything behind and starting anew, after watching countless horrors befall her homeland, my mother had not given up hope. Aung San Suu Kyi had not given up hope. And indeed, the people of Burma had not given up hope. I traveled back to Burma several times thereafter as part of my work on human rights advocacy and assistance, but by then University Avenue had been closed to traffic and Burma's fate remained very much uncertain. So then, what a remarkable and joyous thing it is today to catch a glimpse of Aung San Suu Kyi. You no longer must imagine her behind barbed wire or pump your fist in silence, because she's here. And you can, and I will, and my mother will, and my 96-year-old grandmother will, who's right there. We will cheer very, very loudly. And before we cheer for Daw Aung San Suu Kyi, let us give a rousing round of applause to the Executive Director of Amnesty International, Suzanne Notzel. It is with great thanks and great honor that I introduce you, and thank you to Amnesty International for not just fighting for Aung San Suu Kyi, but for political prisoners everywhere. Suzanne?
Thank you, Alex. So it was 1988. United States was in the middle of a presidential election. There was one candidate who was talking about a kinder, gentler America. Some of your parents were getting ready to have you. Some of your parents probably hadn't even met yet. But in Burma, things were not gentle. After 20 years of brutal military rule, tens of thousands were marching for democracy. It started with students and then it spread throughout Burma. The marches were peaceful until the government began firing on the crowds. Don't fire upwards, Burma's leader said. Soldiers killed at least 3,000 people. That's the same amount as on 9/11, but in a country 1/5 the size. And when a young leader helped found a political party based on a philosophy of nonviolence, the Burmese dictators picked her up and put her under house arrest, where she would remain for most of the next 24 years. For 22 of those years, Amnesty International has fought on behalf of Aung San Suu Kyi. It's activists like all of you, writing letters, holding vigils, pressing governments to do something. We fought after her party won election and the government refused to recognize the results. We fought after she won the Nobel Peace Prize and was denied permission to go and accept it. And we fought after the Saffron Revolution in 2007, which the government repressed with brutality. So, Aung San Suu Kyi, I can't tell you how thrilled we are to welcome you here today. We are so thrilled to have a chance to express to you our admiration for your courage, for your perseverance. We're thrilled because you have been a catalyst for change, not just in Burma, but all over the world. You have said that one prisoner of conscience is one prisoner of conscience too many. But thousands are free because of you and the activists that you have inspired for decades. Out there, you see the next generation of activists, and they're already hard at work for human rights. And we need that because there is work to do. There is work to do in Sri Lanka, where the government has tortured, killed, and imprisoned hundreds just for peaceful dissent. There's work to do in Gambia, where at least 38 people are at risk of execution amid a deeply flawed justice system. And there's work to do in Russia, where a Russian court sent Pussy Riot to jail for years for singing a song. And yes, there is work to do in this country, where we hold people indefinitely without trial, flouting our own Constitution. Daw Suu, the activists here wanted to find a way of conveying to you that when we stand together for human rights, we are all Aung San Suu Kyi. We have made your fight our own, and we will stand with you until human rights is a reality for your entire country. And they wanted to say something else. They wanted to say that we stand with all of those who are jailed for peaceful dissent, people of every nationality, religion, and persuasion in every part of the world. So we'll turn around our masks. Each one of these faces is the face of someone Amnesty has identified as a prisoner of conscience somewhere in the world. Our hope is that someday, hopefully sooner than it took for you, they will be free to live in free countries all over the world. In honor of what you have done, we have a small present for you, but it's not going to be presented by me. I mentioned briefly the 3 Russian punk rockers who are imprisoned there for the song that they sang in a Russian cathedral. Nadia Tolokonikova, Masha Alokina, and Katya Samusevich. They're not free. Not yet, the members of Pussy Riot. But Nadia's husband, Pyotr Verzilov, and his 4-year-old daughter, Gira, are free. And they, fellow activists, they are here with us today to show the world the power of prisoners of conscience.
Go ahead. Thank you. A big bunch of flowers.
Usually it is older people passing the torch to the young, but this is a gift of thanks. Prisoners of conscience, designated a generation apart, yet united in the struggle for a cause that transcends time and geography, and determined to build a rising wave of grassroots activists that will get Gira's mother and her bandmates and thousands of others of prisoners of conscience freed. Aung San Suu Kyi, thank you for the long, lonely fight you have waged with endless determination, grit, and passion. And to those who've come here today, those who are participating in this event from all over the world, thank you. Thank you for what you've done, and thank you in advance for the fight you will wage. Aung San Suu Kyi has made not just one country, but the entire world a kinder and gentler and freer place. Now it's our turn to ask questions, to probe, to think, to plan for how to take the triumph of Aung San Suu Kyi and make it power 1,000 other human rights victories. Nobel Peace Prize winner, courageous leader for peace, Burmese parliamentarian Aung San Suu Kyi.
Thank you. Thank you for being here today, and thank you for everything that you did for me over the last 24 years. It was said just now that mine was a long, lonely fight. Long it was, but not lonely, because I knew there were people like you out there rooting for me, working for me, trying their best to make sure that I would gain my freedom. This is what Amnesty International means to a lot of political prisoners, that they were not alone, that they were remembered, and that their fight was been fought for them while their arms were shackled. So I would like to ask you to continue this fight, but in a slightly different way, especially the young people. When we talk of passing the torch on, we want to make sure that that torch is brighter and warmer. So it's not just a matter of making sure that political prisoners are freed. You, the young, have got to try to get to the root of why they are political prisoners. Until you do that, you will never be able to ensure that this world will be free of prisoners of conscience. So the younger generation must go a step further. With every generation, there should be improvement. So you must find out why they are political prisoners. Why do people put away those who disagree with them? Why are people afraid of disagreement? Why are people afraid of things that are different from what they are and what they have known? If you can do that, then you can achieve amnesty for the whole world, an amnesty of the spirit, where people are free because they are not shackled by fear. This morning I was talking to some of our Burmese community, American Burmese community at American University. And we have a problem in Burma. Burmese people tend to quarrel. I suppose that's a Burmese laughing, because the Burmese people know when I talk about Burmese people quarreling, about being jealous of one another, about not getting on. Now, we have to find out why these things happen. In Burma, which is a Buddhist country, where compassion should be the ruling emotion, we had 50 years of military rule, and much cruelty was committed during those 50 years. Why did we become like that? Why was there so much hatred? Why was there so much brutality? I believe that the seed of hatred is fear. It's fear of something. If we look at the word phobia, it means irrational fear. It is also defined as intense dislike. These two are linked. It is fear that leads to dislike and hatred. So what the young people must do is try to eradicate fear. Unless you work at the root of hatred, you will not be able to get rid of hatred. And unless you get rid of hatred, you will not be able to rid this world of political prisoners. Because prisoners become prisoners out of the fear of others. Those who fear, the others who fear that they will be trouble, that these prisoners are people who will challenge them, who will challenge their authority, who will be a threat to the position, who will, by their very difference, show them up in some way or the other. So this is the kind of torch that I would like to pass on to you, not just to free political prisoners, but to free the minds of people who make political prisoners. So this is a big task, but a simple one in some ways. If you know what your goal is, if your goal is very clear, then you will find a way of getting to it. So young people, not just freeing political prisoners, but freeing up the minds that put people in prison. Please let that be a task for the next generation. Thank you.
Daw Suu Kyi, it goes without saying that this is a momentous occasion, and it is, I think Secretary Clinton used the word delicious yesterday in describing how delicious it was that you are not only here, but here as an elected member of the Burmese government. I would say it is incredible as well as delicious. And certainly I think none of us lose sight of the fact that this is a historic visit. It is historic for both Burma, but also for the international community. And because of that, I think we have a tendency to talk to you and ask you questions that are sort of very grand in theme and very carry with them a lot of gravitas. But I would like to sort of pivot from that a little bit, because you are, after all, a human being as well, a singular human being, no doubt, but someone who eats and lives and breathes as we all do. And one of the things that I've thought about in the 15-odd years of your house arrest is how you actually survived it. And certainly hope is an incredibly powerful and driving force, but it also exists as a counterpoint to despair. And I would love to know from you what time or what times you felt most despondent and what you did specifically to overcome that despair and return once again to a hopeful place.
I have to say honestly that I never despaired. Despair was not part of what I went through. But there were times when I was very, very worried about our people outside. In some ways, because I was already under house arrest, nothing more could happen to me. I was safe. But I had to worry for those who were still outside. Are they safe? Because house arrest is a lot easier than imprisonment. And I always worried about our people who were in prison. So I think those were the most worrying moments of my life, but not despair. I never felt despair.
I know that there's a lot of talk of the broken piano in the house on University Avenue and the books, and I just to know...
A good thing it was broken because I play very badly.
But well, were those the things you turned to when you weren't trying to listen to the radio or otherwise thinking of the struggle of the Burmese people as a human being?
Reading.
In some way?
I love reading, and that really was what kept me from feeling that I was as free as anybody else, because through my books I could get to wherever I wished to. And I would really like to take the opportunity to encourage our young people to read, not just sit in front of the net, but to read.
Speaking of our young people, they have many questions for you. I think there were thousands submitted online for this event, a testament to your and Amnesty International's legacies. I want to go first to Raja Arbab from Charlottesville High School, who has a question for you. Raja?
Okay. Hi. Burma is now transforming from one of the most repressive regimes in the world to the beginnings to openness. What do you see as the obstacles and continued improvements in your country, and how can we as Americans help?
There are a lot of obstacles. The first one is, of course, that we have lived under military dictatorship for 50 years. That's half a century. It's a long time. And people acquire certain mindsets, and getting out of a particular mindset is not easy. So there are many obstacles that we have to overcome. We have to do the work ourselves, but the help of friends is indispensable. And we particularly look to the United States because it has always been a champion of democracy in Burma. Everybody has been remarking on how united the United States Congress was in welcoming me yesterday. I want Burma to be a reason for unity in the United States Congress. And I also would like a lot of help from the United States Congress and from the rest of America in helping us to build up democratic institutions. This, of course, means practical help, such as funding, as well as the kind of help that you give through advice and engagement.
Thank you.
Thank you, Raja. Our next question is from Yasmin Radboud from the University of Maryland, Baltimore County.
It's an honor. So my question, as the Arab Spring movement has showed us, the power of a youthful and idealist generation often creates a disconnect between the old and incumbent. How can youthful Americans and youth of other countries run by incumbents deal with human rights in a less violent and revoltive manner as displayed by the Arab Spring?
I think human rights and violence really do not go together. If you believe in human rights, you do not believe in violence. I do not understand people who think that violence is a legitimate way of defending human rights. Because by using violence, you are undermining the very foundation of human rights. So I think if you want to protect human rights, you should do it through your ability to resist violence at every stage of the way. Unless you can do that, you will not be upholding human rights in the long run. I do not believe that means and ends can be divorced. They are linked. The means that you use will affect the ends that you're working towards. And if the means are not right, then the ends will be distorted. So for those who wish to defend human rights, I would say, first of all, you have to be prepared to endure. Not so much to be able to move against others, but to stand against others. And from this position of endurance, you can go on to do many, many things that you would not have thought was possible. But once you start, you will know that these things are possible.
Can I actually ask a follow-on to that, which is, are you surprised at how restive the world is, speaking of the Arab Spring and looking at what just happened in Libya and the protests that have swept the Middle East and the Arab world, how unstable the world seems at this moment in time?
I don't think you can say that the world is restive. I think human beings are restive by nature. It's just that these days we know more about all the restlessness and the instability all over the world, as we have never had the opportunity to know before. When you read history, for example, at the times when Tamberlin was raping and pillaging all over the place, I mean, if we had had the internet then, think of what the news would have been like. So I think it's just that we're just better informed of what is going on everywhere. It's not just that the world has got worse. I do not believe that the world has got worse. If the world had got worse, Amnesty International wouldn't be here.
Very fair. Our next question is from Kira Bell from James Madison High School in Virginia.
Hi. Would you say that human rights should be the same for everyone all over the world? Or are there national or cultural conditions that make those rights somewhat different in different countries?
I find it very dangerous when people say that natural and cultural situations should be, mores should be taken into consideration when determining what human rights are, because this has been done in Burma. We were told for many years that human rights and democracy were artificial Western imports and therefore had very little to do with the people of Burma. This was a way of denying us our basic human rights. For me, human rights is based on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, to which we set a signature. I'm very proud to say that Burma was one of the first countries in the world to sign this declaration. And so human rights should be for all human beings. I do not think there's anything in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights which is unacceptable to a decent human being. The fact that you start by recognizing the basic dignity of every single human being is the right way to approach human rights.
Thank you.
Our next question, yes? Are you ready? Is from Audrey from the University of Pittsburgh.
My question is, who are the Rohingya in Myanmar and why are they being persecuted by the government of Myanmar?
The question was, who are the Rohingya?
Could you sort of speak directly into the mic?
My question is, who are the Rohingya in Myanmar and why are they being persecuted by the government of Myanmar?
I think you should not use emotive words like persecution, because what had happened in the Rakhine was violence, communal violence, and there were crimes committed by both communities. And when you focus on what one community suffers, then you create further hatred. I think we should look at it as coolly as possible. The first thing to do to diffuse the situation there is to think of it from the point of view of rule of law. And this is where your question, who are they, comes in. We have to look at it from the point of view of rule of law in three different ways. First of all, rule of law in the sense of handling crimes as they should be handled. That is to say, when a crime is committed, action must be taken in accordance with the fact that justice must not only be done, but seen to be done. If this had been, if such action had been taking place in the case of the first crime that set off a whole series of communal violence, then I think we would not be in the situation we are today. Now, that is the first requirement of rule of law. But rule of law must always be linked to human rights. Everybody's human rights, as I said earlier, must be sacrosanct. And rule of law must protect everybody and their human rights. And then there's rule of law with regard to citizenship. We have citizenship laws in Burma. And everybody in Burma must have the rights of a citizen in line with the citizenship laws. But we should go a step further and examine whether our citizenship laws are in line with international standards. That is the second step. But to begin with, we have to make sure that everybody who is entitled to citizenship in Burma under the present laws are given citizenship. And the third aspect of rule of law, which I think would help the situation, is to make sure that there are no illegal crossings of the border. This has added to the problems. Bangladesh claims that many Muslims come over from Burma and they do not really belong to Bangladesh. And Burma claims that a lot of Muslims who are now in Burma are actually people who have come over illegally from Bangladesh. It is very difficult to prove whether such assertions are right or wrong because the border is so porous and so badly policed. So if we could take simple rule of law steps to contain the situation, then we can go on to the next stage of diffusing the tension and bringing harmony between the two communities. It's not going to be something that you can do overnight. Communal tensions have existed for decades. They erupted recently because of one crime that was committed and not handled properly. It focused on all the problems that had been existing between the communities over the last decades, but it all came to a head. And the reason why I do not want to use accusative words is because I want people to just sit back and think of ways of resolving the problems than of accusing. Accusations do not always diffuse problems. They do not always resolve problems. Sometimes the proper accusations should be made, but they should only be made after due examination of the evidence. In the case of the Rakhine, where there have been so many problems between Muslims and Buddhists, I would like to urge everybody to do what they can to bring about reconciliation. I was asked about this yesterday, and I made the point that condemnation does not necessarily bring about reconciliation. Sometimes, on the contrary, it puts obstacles in the path of reconciliation, which is why I do not want to use condemnatory expressions. So I hope you understand. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I actually, Daw Suu Kyi, as a follow-up to that, I mean, that question was specifically focusing on the Rohingya, but I'm not sure how many people know the history of Burma as far as the question of national unity. And certainly there are tribes, the Kachin, the Karen, the Shan. It's been an issue for Burma throughout its history. And I wonder, you know, and it is a history that has been very, very deeply troubled in terms of violence perpetrated by and against ethnic tribes. And there is a deep distrust of the military government, given the fact that the military is still, you know, a very powerful thing inside Burma. How do you see the road ahead in terms of reconciliation and erasing years, decades, if not centuries of scars?
Well, you must...
And a light, so the light is on. That's encouraging.
Together the information.
Does this work?
Yes.
I was just saying that the military regime is brutal not just to ethnic minorities, but to the majority Burmese as well. This is the nature of military regimes. And what we have to do is to build a society where such
authoritarian governments do not take over power anymore. But the distrust between the ethnic minorities and the majority Burmese, and the distrust between other ethnic nationalities, is one of long standing. But I am convinced, I'm confident that this can be resolved, because over the last 20 years, when my party, the National League for Democracy, was persecuted and oppressed by the military regime, our strongest and closest allies were ethnic nationality parties. They stood by us at a time when other Burmese parties did not dare to stand by us. So we have known from experience that unity can be achieved through understanding, through a determination to...
I think it's the power of your oratory that keeps
Do you think it's a mic that's falling?
There you go.
Let's come back again.
There you go. Our next question is from Barbara Svenik from New Paltz University.
Hello, it's a true honor. What kinds of challenges, problems, or questions keep you up at night?
Well, what keeps me up at night is the fact that I find it very difficult to sleep. It's true, I'm a very light sleeper, and every little noise wakes me up. But on the whole, I've learned something which I'll pass on to young people. When something troubles me, I think to myself, well, after 24 hours, this will seem less serious. And the moment I think like that, the whole thing becomes much easier. And you must start practicing this now. When something looks as though it's going to be the most horrible thing that ever happened to you in your life, think to yourself, after 24 hours, this will seem much less serious. And once you start thinking like that, you begin to get things into proportion. So this is why usually issues do not keep me awake, but the fact that I'm a light sleeper does.
Thank you. Our next question is from Emily Ramirez from Brooklyn Tech.
Hi. You have shown that one person can make a huge difference to a country, but you have paid a high personal price. Has it been worth it? How can you forgive the military for holding you in house arrest for 15 years? Do you see our world progressing or sliding backward freedom-wise?
Has it been worth it? Yes, I think it's been worth it. And I have to say that I have never thought that I was making any sort of sacrifice or undergoing any kind of suffering. I always thought of myself as following a path that I had chosen for myself. And because of that, I never felt that I was suffering unnecessarily. And also, I never forgot that I was in a much more fortunate position than my colleagues who were in jail. So when you ask, can I forgive the military for having put me under house arrest for, 17 years, something like that? Well, to begin with, I've always been very fond of the military. You mustn't forget that it was my father who founded the modern Burmese army. And my earliest memories of him were in uniform. Not himself, because I can't remember him really. I was 2 years old when he died. But the photographs around the house showed him in uniform. So I'd always thought of my father as a soldier, as a member of the Burmese army, as well as the father of the Burmese army. And because of that, I'd always had deep affection for the army. And I have to say that that affection never vanished throughout the years that they kept me under house arrest. And I must be fair and say that although they kept me under house arrest, they treated me well. Most of them treated me as my father's daughter. That is to say, they treated me as a member of the family, albeit a rather troublesome one. So forgiveness is not an issue. I don't feel I have anything to forgive them for.
Thank you so much.
I'll say that when on one of my first trips to Burma, I thought you were under house arrest. And I remember that it was early in the year and they were celebrating Aung San Day. And it was this day of national pomp and circumstance. And the irony was quite thick, given the fact that you, his daughter, were under house arrest. And here was an entire nation celebrating his legacy. Do you, as you progress.
Which year was that?
That would have been 2008 or 9.
I think you must have been making a mistake because soon after I'd been placed under house arrest, they started trying to, they started removing my father's photograph from public places, and the journals and magazines were not allowed to publish photographs of my father unless he was part of a group. And my father's portrait used to be on the currency, and that was changed. So they did take steps to try to eradicate my father from the consciousness of the nation. So I don't think it could have been...
I'm not trying to speak out of turn. I don't think there were pictures of your father, but it was officially Aung San Day, and the celebration was much more about the military than him.
No, there isn't such a thing as Aung San Day either.
Then I have no idea.
There's martyrs. What time of the year were you in Burma?
This was January.
January.
This is now getting to be a hazy trip down memory lane.
January, you're probably about Independence Day, which is the 4th of January.
That might have been
And
what it
of course, my father is considered the architect of Burmese independence.
Yes.
But still, I don't think you would have seen too many portraits of him around.
But there's still the notion that there is a celebration
Yes.
of Burmese independence. The point has definitely been made by given the
Yes.
fact that
I think the policy has changed now. Last 19th of July, this is Martyrs' Day, the day my father was assassinated, the government gave much more public recognition to it than they have done for a long time. Previously, before 1988, it was it was traditional for at the beginning of July to start producing quotes of my father in the newspapers, portraits and articles about him, right up to the 19th. And then there were also programs on television about him. Things started changing after I entered the movement for democracy. And one of the first signs of this was in 1989, before I was placed under house arrest. I was placed under house arrest after Martyrs' Day which was 19th July. I was placed under house arrest on the 20th. But in the week before, they were still keeping to the old program of television commentaries about my father, about Martyrs' Day, and photographs of my father, including family photographs. And we knew that something was not quite right when the family photograph of my father, my 2 brothers, and my mother holding me up as a baby was produced on television, but they cut me off there. So my mother's arms were like that, but there was no baby.
That's a sign that things may not be that
things
well.
are changing. Yeah.
We just have a few more questions, but just to the point of the government, the thing that always strikes me in sort of, I won't say totalitarian, but in governments where the state has a heavy hand, there is language that the Burmese government uses, whether in official signs and signage or in the New Light of Myanmar, which is the mouthpiece of the government, that is distinctly Orwellian in nature.
Yes.
And now that you are part of the Burmese government, I wonder, in terms of moving the government forward, in terms of the interaction the government has with the citizens of Burma, how it speaks to the citizens of Burma, the notion of transparency, which is a relatively new concept. How have you found that process to be in terms of changing the dialogue between the state and its citizens?
The media has been liberalized over the last 15 months or so, and that's made a great difference because there are now a lot of independent magazines and journals, and their language is quite different from the language of the state newspapers. And I think the state newspapers, and very few people buy the state newspapers for anything except the obituaries. That's what I was always told, that's why they buy them, because they have to they want to read the obituaries. Apart from that, more people are turning to the independent magazines and journals, and now I believe that they're going to allow private newspapers to be non-government, non-state newspapers to be brought out, daily newspapers. So I think because of the language of the other, what I would call normal publications, the state newspapers will also be obliged to use a different set of words.
We are looking forward to the MSNBC of Burma broadcasting soon. We have just one more question from Lindsay from the University of Delaware.
Thank you for being here. My question is, what do you think of Pussy Riot and of the Russian government's recent actions to curtail their free speech?
Well, I don't see why people shouldn't sing whatever it is that they want to sing. Well, there's nothing wrong with singing. I think the only reason why people should not sing is if what they're saying is deliberately insulting or if they sing terribly. I think that would be the best reason for not singing at all. So I would like the whole group to be released as soon as possible.
Can I add one little bit to that question? What would be your message to the Russian government about the decision on a case like Pussy Riot? What would you say to a government that has a case like theirs?
I want to ask one question first. Was there anything in the songs that was nasty to other people?
Well, I guess it's a matter of judgment. But yes, I think people would say, people could take offense at this, that it was provocative.
When you say people, do you mean the government?
Yes.
Well, I think governments don't count as people.
Well.
Governments must be prepared to take criticism. That is one of their duties. I think it's a different matter if you are insulting other people, individuals. But governments must be prepared to take criticism, as long as it is made within the law, in the sense that people were not inciting others to a rebellion. And that is, of course, would be illegal. But governments which are not prepared to take criticism will never turn out to be good governments.
Just as we're wrapping this up, the idea of investment in Burma hasn't really been discussed that much, but certainly it is an incredibly wealthy country in terms of natural resources. There's been an embargo on investment for very, very long. The West is looking towards Burma, and there is a question of how do you open up a country in a way that is sustainable and responsible in a period of rapid change. And I would love to know your thoughts on that.
There are no easy answers to it, but one easy answer that I've thought of is transparency. We want to make sure that businesses going to Burma are transparent. That way we can find out if what they are doing is actually helping our country or harming it. Transparency is very important. And we want to make sure that the investment is what I call democracy-friendly, human rights-friendly. That is to say that investment is aimed at meeting the needs of our people in a way which promotes democratic values and human rights. So that's a tall order. It's very, very easy to say this, but it's a tall order. And if we are to find out whether businesses are actually democracy and human rights friendly, these businesses would need to be transparent. So if I have to give one short, easy answer, transparency to begin with, and then we can make sure that we're going along the right path.
It's impressive that you were able to even give an easy answer to such a complicated question.
It's not really easy.
To the point, Suzanne, I don't know if you have anything else any other questions, but I think we do have to wrap it up.
Yeah, I know we have to wrap it up. I'm going to just do one or two more things as we begin to bring this just extraordinary event to a close. This has been a really, really inspiring moment in our shared history, our history with you and our history as an organization. You have for so many years defined the term prisoners of conscience, and I think your charge to the next generation that our work needs to go beyond advocating for the individual prisoner, that we need to get to the root causes and understand and uproot those forces that put people behind bars, that cause regimes and governments to imprison the Aung San Suu Kyis and the Pussy Riots and the thousands of others. That is a charge that we take seriously as Amnesty, and I know we're going to have all these who've joined us in the room and across the country and around the world coming together in that quest. And in our packet, we have a postcard for all of you that is a message of solidarity for Nadja, Masha, and Katya, who remain in prison. I ask you to fill this out and send your message to them. Take a moment to do so, and we will collect them. Peter and Gira themselves, who are with us, are going to bring those back to Gira's mother and to her bandmates and show them that the world stands with them. We won't let them be silenced. We don't think that that governments are people and that governments have a right not to be offended. So I want to thank you so much, Aung San Suu Kyi, for your courage and your inspiration, and thank all of those who have fought so long and so hard on your case and who continue to fight with us on Pussy Riot and on the thousands of other cases that we work on. I want to thank you, Alex, and I want to thank everybody who has been part of Amnesty, past, present, and future, shining a light on these abuses, and that light is going to shine on. Just before we leave the auditorium, I want to say we're going to ask all of you to remain seated as Daw Suu exits the auditorium. Right before we leave, we want to share this day with the world and show that everybody that when we speak out together, we are strong. I'm going to ask Daw Suu and Peter and Gira and their team to come up on stage. We're going to take a photograph. I hope you'll pull out your phones, take a picture if you can, tweet it to hashtag #RightsGeneration with Amnesty. This has been an incredible, memorable event that is going to stay with all of us for a long, long time to come. So thank you so much to all of you and to Daw Suu.
I was in America this morning. Sorry? I said I wish I'd been in America.